Most leaders don't think about their professional brand until they need it. And by then, they're already playing catch up. I'm Kim Bohr, host of Courage to Advance, and today I'm talking with Nina FRORIEP. Nina's a visual storyteller, an Emmy-winning producer, and a LinkedIn content strategist who helps business leaders and entrepreneurs build a professional presence rooted in real connection, not performance. We explored what trust actually looks like on LinkedIn, why so many leaders underestimate the platform, and what happens when you have the courage to show up as your full self professionally. Let's dive in. Nina, welcome to Courage to Advance.
Thank you so much for inviting me into a courageous conversation.
I am really excited to have you here. So you have gone from producing Emmy-winning documentaries and Oprah specials to helping entrepreneurs really show up on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And that's not an obvious path. What did you see happening on this platform that made you think this is where I really needed to be?
I wish I could give myself credit for being that much in foresight to and have made that a conscious decision. I think I grew into it a little more than anything else, and then recognized that there was a great opportunity there to be had. And the journey itself, that's an evening filling program and at least 2 bottles of wine. So, but the short and skinny of it is that I just noticed. I mean, maybe 10 years ago, it became very obvious that being a producer and what I had been doing up to that point was changing fundamentally with the internet, right? As fundamentally as we're changing today with AI. So I just knew that I had to pivot and pivot drastically. And then I think LinkedIn just was, I very quickly fell in love with LinkedIn just because it was less of the noise. It was less of the gimmicky. It was less of the feeling like I had to produce myself. It was more of an intellectual pursuit and being able to showcase myself from a professional perspective. And, also being a woman of a certain age, there was like that hesitation of selfie mode or blah, 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 everything on video. That to me, although I was a filmmaker myself, that took some work. So, so I just liked LinkedIn. And I mean, it has changed so much just in these last 7-8 years that I've been really intensive on it. It has changed so much, and it still is by far my favorite. And at this point, my only, I didn't even want to call it a social network anymore, social media, network anymore, because it really has become a networking tool more than anything else.
So you really pivoted through your career from that, big budget production to this point of really helping individuals find their own stories, even, from that smartphone lens. Mm-hmm. How has that democratization of storytelling changed the meaning of what we consider that professional brand?
I mean, it's changed so fundamentally, right? There's so many layers to it. I mean, depending on how old you are, we had sort of that change where it was just, you sort of held up a mirror and said, this is who I am. And that was sort of your, the resume stage. I mean, I remember getting my very first website like a million years ago, right? And that was a static thing. We built that thing to last for at least 3 or 5 years. We didn't even have the capabilities of going in and making changes. We had to call the developer to do so. Yeah. And that was okay back then. So the internet helped us put ourselves out there en masse. And that was sort of the start of the democratization. But I think then the next really big step, which back then was called, Web 2.0.
2.0, I think it was.
2.0, yeah, thank you. I did not go through the American schooling system. You can know that. At that point, it became more of a conversation, right? It was not anymore only about, here I am, have a look at me, and that's it. Now it was like a back and forth, and social media really drove that. But it still was more of a showcasing yourself. And I think now the next really big shift, and the LinkedIn algorithm has actually pivoted itself massively just in the last half a year to support that. It now really is no longer, it's still important to have a really nice profile, and it's really important to put some content out, but it's not the strategy anymore. The strategy now, and in a way, I really love this because the strategy now is engaging with other people, as we used to before we all had our noses in our smartphones, right? So it seems like not, I mean, I wouldn't call it a full circle because it's like, we're spiraling up, but we're at a point in our circle where we're like, this looks familiar again. We're actually being asked to have interactions with people.
It almost feels like a lost art form when we think about how do we dialogue with people on a platform like this in a way that can feel authentic, in a way that can feel like we're able to, honestly disagree. I think, you've talked about that recently and things I've seen around how do you effectively engage in something that could be a really rich dialogue.
Yep.
And, especially if you don't necessarily have the same point of view, I think that would be really interesting to share a little more with listeners as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, I think so. And a thought that I just had, and I'm already writing the post for it, is I think our generation has such an advantage right now, and I mean, Gen Xers
Yeah.
and Boomers, because we learned how to have conversations, we learned how to have disagreements, and not immediately fall into some bipartisan camp and shut it down, right?
Right.
And I think millennials, maybe not, but I think the younger generations probably have a harder time with that because they literally grew up with their noses in some kind of a device.
Right.
And I think having the conversations, I just talked about that with Chantal Garg, whose specialty is sort of, how to disagree politely or how to disagree and keep your stance and your conviction, but still also be open to hearing what others have to say. And I think, what's really important is to not be stuck in a silo.
Right.
And I think maybe it's also part of maturity of being able to step back and say, okay, I do not share this opinion. I actually really don't share this opinion. But I also grew up in my circumstances. This person is in their circumstances. We come to the table with very different backgrounds or very different point of views, very different life experiences. Let me give that at least some room to breathe and to acknowledge the fact that this person is other or different. And that's okay too. And then practically, less philosophically speaking, I always say if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything, which was sort of, our mothers, the silent generation. And I think in our case, I think it's okay to agree to disagree, but to do so without slamming the door shut behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think as with everything in life, I'm a huge fan of context. And I think, contextualizing what you're thinking makes a huge difference. And, having a conversation with this is my experience, not it's like this is the truth, but
Right.
my experience is, and then it comes from a personal vantage point that no one can really argue with. Because that's your personal experience and opinion, rather than making it a generic truth, which there is no such thing, right?
Right.
So.
Well, and I think the convictions we hold are so strong in some cases, depending on the topics, that can really come through in a way that's not enriching a conversation or a relationship, even in this type of platform. And I think that's something that we all have to be so thoughtful about, but not overly correct to where then we're just not engaging, right? In thoughtful conversation,
I think
because then it just becomes thin,
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think we tend to surround ourselves with like-minded and like-thinking people. This did come up during the last political cycle, when we had presidential elections here in America. I had a couple of people reach out to me and say, what am I doing with political content? How do I engage with that? My answer to that was, if you don't agree, just don't engage, but never engage to the point where you'll regret it afterwards.
Right.
It's still a public conversation you're having, even if the likelihood that no one will ever see, a back and forth in the comments or something like that, it still is public. And just to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how you were raised, but I was always raised, you don't talk about, what was it? Sex, politics, and religion, right? So
that was it.
So, those are just topics that are off limits, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and in the democratization, so much has become, those boundaries have been, really plowed through in many
Yeah,
cases,
yeah,
you know?
very true. And I think it's also cultural, right? Like in Europe,
Yes.
no one would ever talk about religion. Here in America, religion is a very big topic, right? And a public topic and something people wear to the outside and with pride. Whereas in Europe, that would just never happen, right?
Right.
The religion is a very it's like talking about your sex life. You do not talk like religion is very considered very personal.
Yeah, and it makes sense. So I'm curious if you would agree with this next statement. So to me, for a lot of business leaders that, I have interacted with, they have started to write off LinkedIn as just another place that's more noise or distraction,
Mhm.
and really maybe even labeled it as social media. And as you were saying a moment ago, right, it's really not a social media tool in the way that other things are. And
Mhm.
yet it remains so relevant. So many of them think it's not worth their time, but yet we're saying, but this is the place to go. How do you help people really get past that resistance and see that you really see it for what it actually is?
There is a big movement. I'm actually invited into two summits this summer to speak that are on the topic of growing your business without social media. And each time when I got the invitation, I'm like, you do understand that I'm a LinkedIn person. And they're like, yes, that's why we want you. So I think the shift can be as easy as, LinkedIn is not TikTok, it's not Facebook, it's not Instagram. It has a very
Mhm.
distinct, different flavor. You actually get penalized for posting more than once a day. Um, and it really is look at it as a networking tool
Mhm.
and not as a social media. And there are people who do a really good job that never post and grow on LinkedIn just with a commenting tactic.
Mm.
So those people do exist. I don't recommend it. I think it's just a tremendous amount of extra work if you don't also showcase yourself. But the showcasing is really once a week for most of us is enough. If you
Yeah.
want to do 2 or 3 times a week, if you have a lot to share and you're also promoting, let's say, courses or something lower ticket item, then by all means. But in general, if you are selling higher end coaching or consulting or higher like in the thousands, not even I'm not even talking tens and hundreds of thousands, but in the thousands
Mhm.
dollar plus range, once a week is plenty.
Yeah, I think that's really good, and we're gonna dive a little bit more into that strategy here in a moment. So, one of the things that we did last year is we put out a trust report and this really deep research, and we'll be doing this on an annual basis. One of the things that I thought was so relevant as it relates to this conversation is that it really showed that trust is fundamentally relational, right? So the employees will extend it where they really feel seen and supported and understood, and it's often with those direct, managers or leaders, and less so from the larger institution. And so
Yeah.
do you see kind of that same dynamic on LinkedIn where people are trusting people more over brands? And if so, doesn't that make the leader's presence on the platform even that much more of a strategic necessity?
Heck yes to the second part of your question. People, I mean, there's this old saying, people buy from people.
Mhm.
And that is never more true. It's like a double negative on LinkedIn because most of us or all of us, we have our business pages. The sole reason I have mine and I have my clients do one is so we can grab the logo and make it look pretty when we list our experience. No one engages with pages. I mean, unless you're maybe Coca-Cola, American Express, or
Right.
some other Fortune 500 company, that your business page is just not getting any traction. People gravitate to people. So ever the more important, no matter how big your business is, for the C-suite, for the owner, or whoever is client and employee facing, to show up on LinkedIn and have that presence that if people look at you, be it for HR purposes or because they're already your client, your employees or clients, they just have to see that there is a presence and it's a relatable one. Let's put it that way.
So that makes a ton of sense. And so you really find that this strategy of a brand's awareness really is still coming through the individuals
Yeah.
that represent that brand.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And sometimes I see that, like when I have people who are transitioning, that can sometimes be a little hard. With your
Mhm.
still your identity is still your corporate life, but you're now
Mhm.
building your own life. That can be a bit of a challenge, but you definitely, as a yeah, even as a bigger company, you definitely need a face and a somebody that people can relate to.
So you've spent many years as a storyteller, really coming from that, film to corporate and now into the LinkedIn world and helping people find their voice. When we think back to some of this research we produced, it really spoke to how people don't remember necessarily what happened during the specifics of a disruption, but they absolutely remember how it was handled. And so
Mhm.
that really had me thinking about the story that gets told in the moment. And I have, as you have, I'm sure, seen as well, right? There's people that when they've been separated from an organization and whatever the fashion is, they've really brought that story to LinkedIn. And I'm curious what you think about that. And what is it about that storytelling that specifically makes it such a powerful trust building tool? And do you think people are just, should be doing more of that when they're in these moments of transition, or kind of what's your perspective there?
I mean, we've been telling stories since the beginning of humanity.
Mhm.
It's the way how we relate
Yeah.
or information, teachings, learnings, traditions. It's just always been through stories. So that is just has never changed, right? So that is just really important. And I think I don't know who said that. I think it was Maya Angelou who said, "People won't remember," and I'm botching it terribly,
Mhm.
what you did to them or what you said to them, but they will always remember how they made you feel. And that is what stories do. They make you feel something, and not just imparting dry facts or dry numbers or analytics. You that it's what we remember, and the way that our brains are wired is the story that learning or that stat or that analytic was packed into, right? That's
Mhm.
what we'll remember.
One aspect of our business, we see leaders that are separated from the organization right now. So much of that's due to economic constraints and things of that nature. So things that have nothing to do with performance. But regardless, either way,
Mm.
we often see that they only start to activate that network when they really are in need of something, right? So, and we can all understand the sense of like, oh, I'm too busy to
Yeah.
be thinking about LinkedIn because I'm performing my job. And then all of a sudden we wake up and it's a very different situation that we've now been put into. And so i- how do you think about that, from the perspective of, if it's the equivalent of only calling on your friends, like when we go to LinkedIn, it's like we think about that from, well, we only call on our friends when we suddenly need something, but we haven't been in touch with them for a number of years. What's that professional cost of treating your presence as more that kind of transactional nature on LinkedIn rather than trying to nurture it, even if you're in a very busy, corporate organization in that way?
I would say look at it as the same way as you're keeping up with your family and letting them know what you're up to and what you're doing. So it's basically just say, I don't know, when I was younger, I would write the obligate Christmas letter and send it out to all my uncles, aunts, grandparents, and everybody else that my
Mhm.
parents put on my list that I have to write to. Um, and it's a little bit like that, and a little bit goes a long way. So if you are super busy, I always talk about the list of 25, and it can be just anything 25. It also can be 30 or 15 or 50. It doesn't matter. Have a list. And that list is, if you're still in corporate and you're super freaking busy and you have, don't know where your head is, have that list where it's a couple of people that you occasionally reach out to. And I mean, yes, it can be on LinkedIn, but obviously it can also be different ways. But
Mhm.
like you come across an article that is pertinent to your friend Kim, who, helps people who have been laid off. Like, let me share that article with her.
Mhm.
Let me, here's a really funny meme. Three different people send me the same meme of a Labrador saying, I chased a squirrel. And then it's like LinkedIn speak. And then it's like, a paragraph this long on how he cornered that poor squirrel. So, people are are obviously thinking, of me when they see that. So have a list of a couple people that you just reach out to regularly, and maybe your choice is that these 5 people I will reach out on LinkedIn, because when the time comes, these might be some rainmakers that I see being very active on LinkedIn that might be able to make some introductions, right? But it also can be text or email. In a way, it's just like always have that, the board of you, that you can activate when you need it.
I think that's a really important tip for people to think about, because it goes into that place of, I think sometimes people are just thinking about, well, what do they want to hear from me, or what do I want to share? And I think if you're looking at it from the lens of, these are people that I respect, I find interesting, I think it would be interesting to engage with them in a way that would be maybe more stimulating. And so you start to think about turning it into a place of a value that you can bring to somebody else and what you can share, and developing that relationship. And I think it seems something that could also be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, yeah. It can be sharing an article. It can be like, I hear about this podcast. I know they're looking for people. This person will be a perfect guest on it. Spend those 2 minutes it takes to make an introduction, right?
Yeah.
Like in the old days, I would have probably felt compelled to call one person and the other person, also both for permission. Can I make an introduction? Nowadays, these things are a little looser, and you can just like throw 2 people into a chat in the DMs on LinkedIn and say, hey, I think the 2 of you should talk.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's much more casual, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, you want to give context as to why they should be talking with one another, but it just is no longer as formal as it used to be to connect people. And that's a great tool to also just sort of have some karma kudo points in your bank, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people that feel like they're really unclear about their, that professional narrative? Maybe it's because they're transitioning, maybe because they've just been in an organization for a while and they're just realizing that they need to start to think about their future differently. How does that lack of clarity start to cost them when they start to realize things like this, it's going to be in a time of need? So how do you kind of coach people through when they're like, but I don't know what I have to give, or I am not clear on what I want to do next? What do you do there to help them not delay in engaging in this way in LinkedIn?
The first answer to that would be, I referred them to one of my branding friends. Like there's Tiffany's is phenomenal. There's a couple of other people in our ecosystem, in our community, that are really good in getting people, because that is a little bit out of my purview. But, and, sometimes I think the first step is listening. And in this case, reading, seeing what is on LinkedIn. What are people that are like me? What are they doing? What are they talking about? What interests me? And we all have opinions on different things. So being out there as a human who has opinions and has maybe some passions, right? There's nothing wrong with talking about that, right? I mean, 2 years ago, I had my first photo exhibit. LinkedIn was plastered with my photos and me talking about this photo exhibit. I mean, always from a perspective of business, et cetera, but still, it was like, that's all I could talk about for like a year.
Yeah.
While I was getting ready, and that was okay, and it got a lot of traction. It got a lot of more people into my ecosystem. So having, as long as you contextualize it, that's always important. Like, yes, I work on LinkedIn with people about their LinkedIn, and I'm also a photographer, and these are a couple of, photos or whatever. So contextualizing is important, but it's basically just start sharing something.
Yeah.
And the something, you don't want to go into the messy middle. You don't want to go into poor me. You don't want to go into, oh my God, but go into something that you can talk about intelligently and share with other people and get a conversation going.
So I think that example is really interesting to talk a little further about. So you brought in something that was more personal in your interest, but into it from a professional realm, which I think is some of that vulnerability that helps build relationship as well. Did you feel like doing that deepened some of the trust with your audience, just brought more people into awareness about who you are and what you're doing in ways that were maybe a little different than how you were approaching it before?
I think so, for sure. I mean, I've seen that on several occasions where being less professional has actually helped me. But I always, when I say less professional, I'm still being professional, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
when I talk to clients about what is it that I want to share that is not just about my specialty X or my expertise X. It's like if you're feeling unsure about it or you're not feeling comfortable about it, pick three things out of your life that you are happy to share. So, in my case, everybody knows I switch back and forth between Switzerland and New York. They know I have a dog, and I do artwork and photography. Those are safe topics that I can talk about, forever. It gives me a three-dimensionality, a personality, without really disclosing too much about my private life, the parts that I don't want to talk about. And I always say, if we create a void, it will be filled with conjecture.
Yep.
So give them give them something about you personally.
Yeah.
We were talking about earlier with storytelling being an innately human condition. So is meaning making, and so is connecting with other humans. And if I just always talk about LinkedIn algorithm and LinkedIn this and LinkedIn that, people are like, she's the LinkedIn gal, but that is not memorable because there's 50 other LinkedIn gals over there. But if I can say, oh, and I have this crazy little dog that runs me ragged and runs my life, now it's already much more relatable, right?
Yeah.
So, and half of my time I get to live in the Swiss Alps, and have all this beautiful scenery, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. Now it's the Swiss Nina with the dog who is the LinkedIn expert. It just
Yeah.
makes it more fun. And that in a way, although it seems at face value maybe counterintuitive, but that builds trust, right? I'm now a
Yeah.
three-dimensional human being who has, who can't keep her dog under control. He's very much under control, but again, they're just funny stories we run about it, right? And has the luxury of traveling back and forth
Yeah.
between urban America. It just makes it more memorable and more interesting, and with that, it builds trust.
I think that's really important to feel like for someone to experience you from feeling a little bit more well-rounded,
Yeah,
in that
yeah,
way. And I think that does feel more of the deeper connection emerging. So one of the things that we had also seen in this research was that trust is the strongest with, the leaders and managers, the direct reports, but it also breaks the biggest. So we kind of talked a little bit about that. But what I'm curious about is when people on the platform have been engaging and then suddenly disengage, so like that trust starts to break in that regard, or does it? I guess that's what I'm curious about. Does it,
yeah.
if you're kind of being consistent and all of a sudden you go dark, what does that do to someone's trust and brand and professional image from that lens that you hold?
If you go dark, you still have your profile, and people will still see that you posted. It'll just say, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months
Hmm.
ago. I think if you are in an active selling cycle, that will hurt you very much so.
Hmm.
But let's say you go on a 3 month, wishful thinking excursion into the Arctic. Maybe you'll have the backlash for a couple of months after, but the internet is also very forgiving because it moves so fast, right?
Hmm.
So 3 months later, no one will remember. Um, so it depends a little bit on, again, it's a context. What are you selling? Who
Yeah.
are you selling it to? What is their behavior on LinkedIn? I mean, if I go dark for a week or two, I'm not going to worry about it.
Right.
But if I were to go, and I will go dark giving context prior. So
Mhm.
the last message or post that people see is like, guys, lifetime chance I'm doing X. I'll be back in 2 months. Follow me on Instagram to follow my photos. I've actually done that on several occasions when I have gone to the Arctic. So it just, and not, unfortunately, never for 3 months. It just sort of, then it creates a holding
Yeah,
place.
it's like a bridge. You're bridging people
Yeah.
into something that then is more personal, and it's just giving them a sense of like there's context and a reason whether they choose to follow or not. I think that's really smart.
But if you go dark without explanation, that can be
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah, or it feels like in the bursts, right? So like if you see people doing a lot of bursts, then a lot of nothing and a lot of bursts, does that feel like I guess it depends on that time frame in between.
Well, there's also two considerations here. There is, your audience who probably is not sitting there looking at all your posts and saying, "Oh, Kim didn't post last week."
Yeah.
So that's probably the rarer occasion. What is much more damaging now is the algorithm. So LinkedIn's algorithm is innately lazy. As my business partner explained to me, like AI is innately lazy. It just wants to know who you are and then just, peg you and leave you there and know what to do with you. The
Yeah.
moment you start doing things differently or out of sync or out of consistency, it's like, ooh, 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 ooh. And then the first reaction is to pull back and not do anything. And that's the one thing I always tell everybody on LinkedIn. If there's one single thing you focus on, it is being consistent. Rather post once a week only, forever, than do these bursts, because the bursts are damaging from an algorithmic point of view, because the algorithm needs to be able to reliably find your content every Tuesday in the morning or every Tuesday and Thursday in the morning. If it doesn't, it stops looking for it because it's not reliable. And in a way, your audience is the same way, although your audience might not be like looking at their watch and saying, "Oh, it's 10 a.m. Tuesday, Kim must be posting," but somewhere in the back of their minds, they actually do. So I would rather and even if you are like disappearing for those 3 months and it's planned, just post something that and you can say there will be no engagement on this because I'm still gone fishing, right?
Yeah.
But here's, or maybe upload some photos from whatever it is you're doing. Or even if you have surgery, it's okay to talk about these things, right?
So if you could give, one or two pieces of that philosophical advice to a business leader who's been neglecting their LinkedIn presence, what would it be? And how would you encourage them to be engaging in this more strategic way you're talking about?
To get them started, I would just say, look at LinkedIn as your business card that you're bringing with you to a networking event, and you want to be proud of it. Like you want to be proud to hand out your business card and not hand it out and make 5 excuses on to how much you hate the print, the color, the font, and the whatever, right? So you want to have something that you enjoy having. So putting a little bit of thought and maybe even a little bit of money into having a nice LinkedIn profile, I think is sort of a really nice first step. It's like you're getting your makeup and your hair done, or you're getting a fresh shave before you present yourself out in the world in a real life event, right? If you're going to a conference, you're going to put a lot of care into what are you going to wear, and you're going to go probably to the hairdresser and get the roots fixed and whatever you need to do, right? You do the same with your LinkedIn profile, right?
Right.
And then in terms of content, as I said, if you're doing something once a week, if you have a newsletter, if you're sending out an email, if you have any other assets that you're already doing anyway, just repurpose those. And again, once a week is enough. And then look at who's commenting. First of all, make it easy for people to comment by asking an engagement question, which is a whole other, evening filling program. And then make sure that you actually look at who's commenting and write them back. It's not like you're at a cocktail party or a networking party and you mid-sentence, you don't just leave, go to the bathroom and never come back. I mean, it's the same on LinkedIn, right? If this is a networking opportunity and a networking platform, you want to make sure you continue the conversation, because that is more than anything else that what builds trust.
I really appreciate a couple of things in particular you said there. The last one there around, that idea of thinking of it in the same type of social interaction we would have if we were in real life with somebody, right? And I think that's really an important point to note. The other one I think that's really big is if there are leaders out there who are trying to network differently, if they're thinking about, maybe making a career change, or if they're just wanting to show up differently. I think what you said was really important too, around think about this in preparation before you walk into that networking opportunity or that, the board opportunity or whatever it might be, because people inevitably will take a look at your profile, or if you intentionally connect with them. And so doing that ahead of time so you can be proud and as you said, not making excuses for why it's not updated is really, I think that's a really wise tip as well. So where can people reach you if they want to know more about your expertise and the work that you do?
So surprise, surprise, on LinkedIn.
I know it's a softball question, but
I know. No.
I feel like you
Great
should be able to
it is
say
a
it.
great question because some people might prefer something else. So, no, LinkedIn obviously is for me the first and foremost, and I'm the only Nina FRORIEP on LinkedIn. So there's no question about which one am I, and you will see my dog. So that'll be a clear giveaway as well. LinkedIn is the best way. Connect with me if you want to mention that we met through Kim. That would be fantastic. So I have context. And our website is clockwiseproductions.com. So you can see a little bit more about how we work with our community.
Thank you so much for being on and sharing all this wisdom. I think it's really helpful on many fronts for leaders today. So I really appreciate your time, Nina.
Always my pleasure to talk about what I love doing.
For our listeners, we have resources relevant to our conversation today that you can access by visiting couragetoadvancepodcast.com. And remember to like and follow our podcast on your favorite platforms so that other leaders can find these types of episodes as well. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Courage to Advance, where transformative leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about having the courage to find them.